Austin and Mexico. Austin was very positive in the sprint race weekend, but from the sprint onwards, we haven't scored a point, despite having a very competitive car. That's a mixture of circumstances. It's a mixture of penalty, contact, reliability, operations, strategy, communication, everything coming together. And we have 4 races where I'm absolutely confident we're going to be able to tie that in and deliver. The team's response has been outstanding to what's happened. It's been one of, this is what we've done wrong, but this is what we are doing to make sure we're on the right track going forward. Much similar to the fact we weren't competitive in qualifying, we've made that step forward. It's a review where everyone comes together, pulls together in these difficult times, and forms a baseline of what we need to do going forward. In terms of Mexico, that 5th-place penalty was very punitive. It really put us into a region where accidents are quite high and likely. And you saw what happened in the case of Carlos. That contact really destroyed his race at turn 1. It broke all the sensors in the front axle, both front axle. And without wheel speed sensors, a lot of your control systems, brake temperatures, etc., are all gone. And the impact was speeding in the pit lane several times and a loss of performance. With Alex, we've been on the back foot that weekend. We weren't there in terms of getting the tyres absolutely where they nailed to be, and I don't think we were quite right on the setup as well, but the correspondence between basic car setup and how we use our differential and other tools as well. Irrespective, what has given us is a good pathway for what we can be doing in Brazil and forwards. So through failure, I think actually we found a pathway on how to operate the car with a combination of Carlos and Alex's data. We have Brazil next, and I'm looking forward to that event. It's a sprint race weekend. It's always one that's a challenge, but it should be positive. Welcome to the Vowles Verdict, presented by Kraken. First question is from Mila, which is, it looks like we have a competitive car, but we haven't delivered what the car can across Austin and Mexico. And what's the biggest learning lesson you've taken from these 2 races? So first, I think that's a very fair observation. In the case of Carlos, absolutely quick in Austin and was flying, but got caught up in an incident, which then not just took him out the race in Austin, so no points, but when we went through to Mexico, despite the great qualifying, when you're 12th, you're really in a high risk of contact in turn 1, and that's what happened. That contact ultimately really meaning that we couldn't score points with him, which I'll go through a little bit later on. In the case of Alex, I think we haven't had the car quite together. We had small little issues that have all been adding up and not quite there on tyre temperatures in Mexico. Now, we will bring that together. There's quite a bit of learning lessons. So you're asking what's the most learning? First of all, with Alex, actually there's a setup direction that we now know we need to be taking from Brazil onwards, which is quite it's more similar to where Carlos is, but it's just making sure the car's more together for him, so it's a good platform to build from. Perhaps it's not the fastest car to the millisecond, but a consistent platform to work from. In the case of Carlos, I think you've seen the paces there. Without penalties or otherwise, I'm confident that we'll be in a good scoring position in Brazil with both. The next question is from Shweta, which is, what happened to Carlos at the end of the race? Because he looked like it shouldn't have stopped, or the car should have kept going. So first of all, what happened to Carlos is that turn 1 incident. It was 3 cars coming to one, Alonso, Carlos and Lawson, really in a space that only 1 car, maybe 2 cars can fit. That created damage on the front left side of Carlos's car. It's actually, in the end, we saw a wheel shield that was broken, but to us, what we saw is a vibration that was just getting worse and worse. And all of the sensors on the front left and the front right started to fail. So we lost wheel speed sensors, brake sensors, a huge amount. The impact on that is obviously control systems, which rely on knowing what the 4 wheel speed sensors are, weren't working as well as they should have done. One of those impacts was the pit lane speed limit, where we were caught 0.2 of a kilometre over the limit. Fundamentally, it's a struggle in that circumstance. The rear wheel speed sensors have slip on it, and it can go slightly quicker than you anticipate it to be. But the real question is at the end of the race. It was simply that we had been pushing very hard on used tyres. Carlos just got slightly caught out with one of the curbs. When he did, he impacted into the wall just on the rear corner. And then after that, drove forward and stopped because it was a reasonable impact. No significant damage, nothing left on the floor, but his race was over. He was already outside the points at that stage. So I think really very worn tyres, pushing very aggressively at the end of the race to catch up to the points. The next question is from Duru, which is, it looks as though it's tricky to get 2 cars scoring consistently in the points. And I think that's a fair observation. A lot of it covered in one of the previous questions about it's actually just not one incident. There were many, many particular bits coming together, be it that on understanding of car setup, our control systems, incidents in the race, strategy. But the reality behind it is this: the field now is separated by 8/10. And what you can see up and down the field is it's inconsistent to where two teammates are. That includes the McLaren, the large gap between those two. And when it's this tight, a small amount of errors that take place in just a build-up, it could be slightly different on setup, it could be slightly wrong run plan that we're doing, slightly wrong strategy, start to have a very significant impact from that. And then further to that, what we did with Alex was we were so far on the back foot that decided to start on a really contra strategy, but that hard tyre just didn't come into its own. It did not even perform relative to the softer tyres, so putting Alex in a situation where he wasn't able to bring the fight back into the field. What are we doing going forward, which is the main point behind this? Quite a revision on how we're going to work with setup with Alex going forward. I think there's a good direction that we establish post-Mexico as the result of that. With Carlos, the pace has absolutely been there. It's now about capitalising on that and making sure we execute cleanly over these next few races. Next question is from Millie, which is, what caused that speeding in the pit lane? We are very reliant on the wheel speed sensors of certainly the front axle, but ideally all four corners to know exactly what speed that car's doing. Because in the pit lane, most teams are tuning to around about 79.8 or 79.9 kilometers an hour. The limit is 80. We got clocked 80.2. Now, on our own measurements, it's very hard to see that because all that was left on the car, all front wheel speed sensors had completely failed after that contact at the beginning. Very strange for the front right too, but the vibration was so significant that it deteriorated all the electronics in the front axle. The result of that was we were reliant on measuring the speed on the rear axle, which you would have thought would be okay. However, we have a lot of slip. As you would imagine, there's quite a bit of power that goes through those rear tyres and they rotate beyond what is the normal speed as a result of it. So it's very hard to track what is a speed above ground relative to the speed that the wheels are measuring on the rear axle. So a lot of the time we use the front axle as a result of that, certainly for control systems and pit lane speed limit. That was the first of those. So the first time we were clocked, we defaulted the modes, make sure we put it into a mode we thought was reasonably safe for a pit stop, but was still clocked 0.2 kilometer an hour over. That was a 5-second penalty. What we then did is we cannot rely on that control system anymore. It was quite, you saw it in fact on how the car was jumping. It was really not a great way to be going up and down the pit lane. So for the second stop, we asked Carlos to drive manually. So took the pit speed limiter off and fundamentally drove to around about 73, 75 kilometers an hour, so 5 kilometers below where he could control it on the way in. What happened is that was fine. We got into the box, we were below the limit. On the way back out again, the drivers are used to clipping into that limiter to slow the car down. But without that limiter in place, Carlos went just a little bit over it by a few kilometers an hour on exit, but that was enough to get a second pit lane speed limit problem. The third one, we just drove through the pit lane at around about 70, 72 kilometers an hour just to make sure we were completely below it. That was for the drive-through penalty. So everything instigated from the first problem, but as you can see how it escalated. One of the learnings from that is I think we could have done a better job overall as a team, and some learnings to take away for next time. Next question is from Zayed, which is 4 races to go. What are you really looking to capitalize on? What are you looking to build on? And for me, it's about setting the foundations right for 2026. We need to make sure that our communications, our operations, the way that we're really extracting performance from the car trackside and points is an improvement over where we are before. And it gives us an opportunity across these 4 races to do exactly that. Of course, we're still fighting for 5th in the championship, but that will come as long as we're delivering on car performance. So first and foremost, what I'm looking for the sprint race weekend in Brazil is clean execution across perhaps what's going to be difficult conditions and making sure we walk away with the maximum points the car can, 2 drivers in that position of fighting for points. Las Vegas, I think, will be a very good event for us, and that's all about maximizing the potential of the car. Going through into Qatar, where I think actually we could struggle a little bit more, but that's a good learning lesson. We have to be competitive at tracks like that going forward into 2026, so we'll try a different setup direction to achieve it. And then finally into Abu Dhabi, where I think you'll find the field is probably the closest it's ever been all year, and again, that's about clean execution down to the millisecond. Sarah asked a really interesting question, not one I've answered before, but it's a good one, which is from the beginning of the season to now, how much of the car is original? What have you changed? And the answer is pretty much all of it has changed. So even probably the most significant items, the chassis is actually a carryover item from 2024, but it was modified. You can see we've got very different side pod entries, different ways of structuring the floor. So it was modified from last year to this year. It's still fundamentally the same chassis. And that's been the same chassis from the start of the year right to where we are now. That's the consistent element. Conversely, the bodywork, the floors, the front wings, the rear wings have pretty much all changed or evolved in some form or another. And you need to. That's the rate of development that you can now see in Formula One. And if you don't stay on top of it, you'll fall right to the back of the grid. The gearboxes, whilst similar from the start of the year in terms of spec, there was actually a small spec change midway through the year, but otherwise pretty much the same ones, and we rotate between them. And then on the power units, they are the same specification. We started with the beginning of the year, it's just 4 of them in the pool, so we use them as and when they're needed. So most of the car completely different, and even down to a bolt, those are changed weekend on weekend, for example.